Welcome to the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. I'm Don Glanden, Head of Graduate Jazz Studies. Each year we welcome to our campus distinguished artists, performers, and thinkers to interact with our students and share their great experience in the idiom. October the 16th, 2017 was a special day as we welcomed Kenny Barron to our campus. Kenny is a native Philadelphian. He grew up here and he attended the University of the Arts briefly before moving to New York to begin his career. It was a pleasure to have him here to discuss his early years growing up in Philly, his philosophy of music education, and his distinguished career. Honored by the National Endowment for the Arts as a 2010 Jazz Master, Kenny Barron has an unmatched ability to mesmerize audiences with his elegant playing, sensitive melodies, and infectious rhythms. The Los Angeles Times named him one of the top jazz pianists in the world, and Jazz Weekly calls him the most lyrical piano player of our time. Kenny consistently wins jazz critics and readers polls, including those in Downbeat, Jazz Times, and Jazz's magazines. He has been awarded honorary doctorates from SUNY Empire State and Berklee College of Music. The Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation awarded him its Living Legacy Award, and he has been inducted into the American Jazz Hall of Fame. Kenny's own recordings for Verve have earned him 9 Grammy nominations, beginning in 1992 with People Time, a legendary duet recording featuring Stan Getz. Today we're happy to welcome Kenny Barron to the University of the Arts.
Thank you so much. In terms of the Grammy nominations, I feel like Susan Lucci. You know who she is? You know, she was nominated for all these Emmys, I think, for daytime soap opera, 20-something times. She never won. So I'm in that same room. I've never won. So, but anyway, it's an honor just to be nominated. So I'm going to start actually by playing for you. One of my favorite composers is Billy Strayhorn. So I'm going to play a piece entitled Isfahan. Isfahan is located in Iran. So it's not so peaceful there right now. But I think this, he wrote this, I think it was the occasion of a Middle East tour by Duke Ellington. So Isfahan. Well, now it's a surprise, because I have no idea what this piano sounds like, or feels like. But that's part of the fun. You know? So when you play piano on your tour, so you get to play what I call the piano du jour, piano of the day. So sometimes it can be a pleasant surprise, sometimes it can be a horrible surprise. But all the notes seem to work. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you, sir.
So I have a picture of a couple young guys up here. JP, you recognize those guys?
Whoa. It's outside the music building. Yeah, wow.
So I used to pick his brains on a weekly basis, so this should be pretty comfortable territory for me. So you were born in Philadelphia,
Right, not too far from here.
1943?
Yep.
So our students hear a lot about Philadelphia, obviously, from being here, and it's one of the, our school identifies with the city and the jazz history of Philadelphia. And I
Yeah.
think that sometimes the younger generations don't always know what that scene was like. So I know you were here until you were about 19, and before you left for New York, you were a student at the University of the Arts.
Right, well, it was called Philadelphia Musical Academy then. Yeah, and I have to confess that I did not stay, and I was paying for it myself, so my mother was really upset, But at the time, I had music education. That's what I was studying at the time, and I just was not into it at the time, unfortunately, and I beat myself up about that all the time. But I was busy hanging out. I wanted to hang out with, I had met all the young musicians in town, so I was hanging out till 3 o'clock in the morning, and my mother actually locked me out of the house one time, so. But that, that's one of the reasons. I was really into just hanging out and being around the music, so. And I went back to school many years later, though.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to talk about that a little bit because
Yeah,
I'm really curious about your philosophy of music education and how that has been almost like a alternate career for you as a pedagogue and as a teacher. It's
Yeah,
been an
yeah,
important part of what you do. We have a very famous family in Philadelphia, the Eubanks.
Right,
and
right.
I know that you started off, your early teacher was Vera Eubanks, and we have a picture of you with Vera.
Ooh,
There you are. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious about Philadelphia at that time and all the people that were here. Some of them became very famous, Lee Morgan and Clifford Brown and others.
Right, right.
And then some of them, like maybe Jimmy Oliver, that are lesser known outside of Philadelphia. And I'm just wondering what the scene was like during those early years for you.
For me, it was great. I guess by the time I was in junior high school, I started meeting a lot of the younger guys. So I grew up with people like Sonny Fortune. There was a bassist named Arthur Harper who was incredible, passed away. Jimmy Oliver, you mentioned. There was a pianist named Hassan Ibn Ali, who you may not know, was really different, at the time. This is like late 50s. And he was kind of an iconic person. A lot of people thought that he was influenced by Monk. But it turns out, and he said himself, no, I'm not influenced by Monk. He loved Elmo Hope. That was his biggest influences, But when you met him, he had this kind of monkish personality about him. He would wear neckties. He would cut them off in the middle. Things like that, He and my brother, I don't know if I had an older brother who was a music, played tenor saxophone. His name was Bill Barron. And he and Hassan were very, very tight, So he would come over to my house. We lived on Montgomery Avenue. And first thing he'd do was he would say hello to my mother, head straight for the piano, and then you wouldn't hear another peep out of him for hours, Many years later, I remember running into him after I had moved to New York, and I came back for something. And he played a chord on the piano. I said, what chord was that? He said, oh, that was a C65. That's the kind of personality he had, But he only did one record with Max Roach called The Legendary Hassan. But there were a lot of people. There was a drummer named Ronald Tucker who had red hair, and they called him the Flame because of his hair, I got the chance to work with, again, while I was in high school, with Jimmy Heath, who was a big influence and a big He was really a big supporter because he knew my brother. So I started working with him and a lot of different other people. There was a saxophonist named Sam Reed, and Philly at the time had a lot of after-hours clubs that would start around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. There was one on Broad Street, I remember, next to the Uptown Theater. I don't remember what it was called, but I used to play in there. And one of the things you had to do, not just play, but you had to play for a show. So you would have to play for a singer, you would have to play for a dancer. Not dancing, not the audience, but what we called a shake dancer or exotic dancer. You'd have to play for that. Usually you'd have to play for a comedian. So it was like a variety show. And for me, it was a great experience. I mean, the dancers would dance to songs by Duke Ellington. So one of the things I learned, I think, was repertoire. You know, I learned a lot of songs, a lot of songs. So when I see somebody pull out a real book now, I say, come on. Now, I was somewhere during a workshop playing a blues, and he pulled out a real book. I said, come on. No, on a blues? You know, so it's a good thing to just kind of memorize and learn. You can learn a song a day. You can actually do that. That's 365 songs, you know. So you should have at your command a list of songs, maybe 500 or 600 songs that you can call on at any time. Somebody says, you know this song? Yeah, I know it. You know. Of course, you're not going to know every song. But Phil Woods got me one time. I was working with Phil somewhere, and he kept calling all these standards, and most of them I knew. There were a couple I didn't know, but I had heard them, so I could kind of fiddle my way around until eventually I learned it. So at the end of the song, he would say, yeah, you fish good. I'm trying to fish and find the right changes. Yeah, you fish good. But to your point, Philly was great. It was a great place.
Just before we leave that, in addition to that one album by Hassan, there was a piano player that did one album that nobody knows about, and I'm wondering if you ever had any contact with him. I guess it was Max and Mingus did a label, Debut Records. And
Yeah,
they put out.
label,
I think they put out Thad Jones' first album.
Yeah.
On that label, and they did a Philadelphia pianist named John Dennis. I've never heard of him. Dennis.
I've heard the name, but I'm not really that familiar with him.
Very curious that he's never come up in any other recordings or. To your point about the standards, I think that this incredible level of lyricism that you have, the way that your lines are, the beauty of the singing nature of your lines, I think, I'm curious if you feel that knowing all those standards has shaped your melodic conception when you improvise.
I would say yes, it has, because that's basically how I learned to play, learning standards. There are a lot of songs that don't have, because they're basically 2/5, most standards, 2/5, 2/5/1, that kind of situation. I played a lot of my brother's music when I was coming up, and he didn't use a lot of 2/5s, 2/5/1s. He used a lot of interesting chord voicings and interesting movement. And one of the things that I found helped, actually, is that I did play standards. So it helped me to kind of negotiate through those unusual chord changes. Because one of the things you can't do when somebody writes music like that, at least then, you can't play your normal stuff. You can't play your little cliches that you have, You have to really come up with something. And fortunately, being able to play through those standard changes kind of helped me a lot, I think.
When I guess you left Philly around 1960, 61?
Actually, 61, yeah.
61. And after doing some gigs around New York, you got on Dizzy Gillespie's band.
Yeah, eventually. That was through James Moody.
Okay.
When I first moved to New York, I lived, which is a great neighborhood, I lived on the Lower East Side. So I could walk to the 5 Spot, and it were two brothers, Iggy and Joe Tremini. They owned the 5 Spot, and they also owned another club that I could walk to called the Jazz Gallery. But anyway, I walked to the 5 Spot, and Moody happened to be working there, and he knew my brother. Said, "Come on up, kid, play something." So I played, and he hired me. So I started working with him, and then through him, I got the job with Moody, and I was there for 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you told me something one time that towards the end of your time with Dizzy, you knew every note of every solo, that you knew what was coming.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that was one of the reasons I decided it was time to leave, because I was starting to do that, I was starting to become very predictable, which can happen. I mean, Dizzy had nothing to prove at that point, so he would tend to play, not all the time, but sometimes he would tend to play certain things. So always, you could count on that, and I was starting to do that as well, So I think maybe I need to just go ahead and leave, My wife wasn't very happy about that.
Yeah, I think sometimes young players don't realize that everybody, no matter how great, has a certain vocabulary, certain way that they play.
And that's very true. I mean, even today, I've hear myself playing certain things that I do constantly. And then I've heard, there's a friend of mine, an Italian pianist named Daro Moroni. So he looks at me sometimes, we do duo concerts, and he'll play a certain lick that he knows I play a lot, and he'll look at me and laugh. But I mean, it's normal. It's really very normal.
I was interested to read about your relationship with Yusef Lateef, because if your bio is accurate, you credit him with having an impact on your improvisational concept.
Oh yeah, very much so. Very much so. Yusef, when I first started working with him, he was playing some unusual music, kind of like my brother, different chord changes, different kinds of movement, and also different rhythmically. I mean, not odd times, but just the whole body of it, the rhythms were very unusual. And he played some unusual instruments. He played an Indian instrument called the Shinai, which is it's a reeded instrument, has a very unusual sound. Not too far from bagpipes, but it's a very long, narrow instrument. He played oboe. I don't know how he did all of that in terms of the embouchure and the stuff, and a tenor saxophone and flute. Was incredible, incredible flautist. So all of that, and music using at the time, very unique improvisational concepts. So I learned a lot just being in the band. And the other thing that was very great was that he allowed me to do a lot of writing for the band. So we recorded and played a lot of my music. So when you hear your music played back and you hear it played well, not that I had anything to do with that, but when you hear your music played well, it's a big incentive to continue writing.
And another thing was that he encouraged you to go back to college, right?
Yes, he did. He did. I guess it was during the late 60s, early 70s. And at one point, he said, you should really go back to school. And at the time, he was teaching at Manhattan, Borough of Manhattan Community College. So I decided to go back, and it was quite funny because at the time, everybody in the band was back in school. So it was myself and the drummer, Tootie Heath, Bob Cunningham. We were all back in school, and we all had a class with Yusef, music history class. And also I was taking flute lessons with him as well, No, it wasn't history, it was a theory class. But I remember one of the projects we had to do was he wanted us to write a kind of a big work, like through composed, as opposed to writing something for improvisation. So I wrote a string quartet, and it was it was interesting. I mean, just doing that was really interesting because it was the first time. And then I think Tootie Heath wrote a woodwind quintet. And Donny Hathaway was in the class as well. Mm. Yeah, so it was a great class, you know, and everybody wrote string quartets or woodwind brass quintets and things like that.
Yeah,
you know.
That reminds me of one of the first lessons I took from Roland Hanna. He said, "I'd like you to start working on a motet." And I thought, can we kind of analyze some Coltrane or something? You know, but the value in going out of the idiom.
Yeah, exactly.
And bringing things back in the idiom, that's really a cornerstone of the way we teach here. We have people analyzing, you know, everything from Messiaen to Scriabin, and then writing jazz tunes based on those concepts, and tremendously valuable. The whole topic of education, jazz education, the debate that went on about the institutionalization of jazz and whether it leads to less individuality, and I think now there's a lot of people advocating for de-emphasizing the importance of a formal education and being in college. And because you've spent so much time in academia, and 20 years at Rutgers, I think?
25.
25 at Rutgers and at Juilliard.
Yeah.
Of course, it doesn't have to be that way. Your instructors, I'm sure Yusef Lateef stressed the importance of developing an individual voice. So just curious on, as you look at how jazz education has developed around the country, some of your thoughts about programs that work or approaches that work and how you approached it.
Well, I know for me, well, you studied with me, so the approach that works best for me, I'm not going to sit down and show you 20 voicings for a C7 chord. What I'm going to do is tell you, okay, these are the possibilities that you can utilize on a C7 chord. You figure it out. You know, if you figure it out, you won't forget it. That's the thing, because that's your discovery then. You know, but if I write down, okay, here's a voicing, that's like memorization. So, which doesn't really help you a lot, I think. But the process of discovering things on your own, they stay with you. You know. Also, one of the things, again, as you know, we play together a lot. You know, so that's one of the approaches I like to use. Actually, just playing, and listening to your students. You hear, okay, maybe they need to work on their touch, their harmonic concept. So those, when you're playing together, it's easier to hear that. You know. Also, a lot of students are into transcribing, which can be beneficial. However, I don't really stress writing down transcriptions. I do stress learning solos, but this way, so that you can develop your ear. I mean, you have to that will help you develop your ear anyway, by writing it down. But the thing that happens is when you write things down, sometimes you get involved only with the notes. And you're not paying attention to that person's sound. If you're a saxophone player and you're transcribing, you're not really paying attention to that person's sound. Or if you're a pianist and you're transcribing, you're not really paying attention to that person's touch. All those things are important, you know. Miles Davis, I guess in 1956, 57, came out with the record Round About Midnight. And I knew everybody's solo on every song, you know. And if I couldn't play, train solo I could not play, obviously. But I could sing it. And that's the thing. So I knew his solo. I could sing it, you know. So that's important. You learn solos. So it's important to do that, to figure out why somebody did something, how they did it. Not that you want to play like that, but you just want to know why, how and why, you know. And I think that's important. And that will, I think, aid you in your own development. Once you figure out, oh, well, these are possibilities here, you know. And then also to get to the point where where you're not thinking about it so much. I mean, that's always been my thing. You think about, and when you're playing, when you're on a gig, you can't think. You know, at least I can't. Anyway, I don't think that fast. You know, so I find that thinking actually slows me down. If I'm thinking and trying to concentrate, well, this next chorus I'll play this, or I'll play this phrase here. Stuff is going by too fast. So you kind of have to, it has to really be intuitive. And learning things by rote will help you to do that. I think help you become a little bit more intuitive, you know. And also not being afraid to make a mistake. That's also important, you know.
There's also something I think you're great at is a lot of the larger kind of philosophical things that have to do with art and music. And we were talking a little bit before you started playing on, to me, Kenny's best playing is right now, you know. And this new album, Book of Intuition, is just an extraordinary album. And I think every generation has its Joey Alexanders and, you know, 10 and 12-year-olds that sound just amazing. And so it's easy for somebody to be 20, 22 years old and feel like you're already kind of getting kind of old, you know? And you're not, somebody's 10 years old is playing, you know, on that level, and you're not quite there. Or you're 26 and you think, well, Clifford Brown had already died at 26, or Bird had already died at 35. And I remember asking you, do you think there's an age thing to keep developing and to keep improving and to have these huge growth spurts? And you said, no, you just keep getting better till you die.
Oh, yeah. Someone described music as a journey, but you don't want to arrive. You know, that's the thing. You don't want to arrive. You want to keep learning and studying. And I'm 74, and I'm still trying to figure it out. You know, still trying to figure it out. You know, there's always some more to learn, some more to do. There's you know, in terms of technique and harmonic concept. I mean, of course, as you get older, your fingers don't move as fast anymore. But still, there's a lot, you know, there's a lot to learn, you know. And I listen to young players. I listen a lot to young players. Fortunately, quite a few of them have studied with me, like Gerald Clayton. Aaron Parks was a student of mine. You know, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Sullivan Fortner, who's an amazing young pianist, you know. So, yeah. And he is, that's right. But I steal as much as I can, you know. And I say that as a joke, but it's like you learn from everybody. You learn from everybody, you know. I mean, I can honestly say there's very little music that I don't like. There's some. I have to confess, I'm not a big fan of country and western music. But that's a personal like. I've learned not to look down your nose at anything unless you can do it better than they can. Then you can look down your nose. You know, but if you can't do it, then you can't look down your nose. You know, so there's something you can learn from every musical situation.
Very good. I want to, I have lots more questions, but I don't want to use up the whole hour, and I want to give the audience a chance to maybe come down to this microphone. If somebody has any questions up there that Kenny can answer, I'm sure there are. They can be specific kinds of musical, theoretical things, or historical things, or who has some questions? Connor, could you come to the microphone? We want to make sure we get your question recorded.
Some of my favorite recordings that you've done in the past have been your duo recordings with various people in trios. So I was just wondering, like, your process in playing with just a bass player, or just a saxophonist, or just another piano player.
So what was the question?
Like, how is your process different than with the whole band?
Well, I think one of the things you're very conscious of is leaving a little bit more space. You know, you don't want to play as much as, say, if you're playing with a drummer, You know, you sometimes, well, at least for me, when I play with a rhythm section, I listen a lot to the drummer, you know, and sometimes we wind up doing a lot of things together. But if you're playing in a duo situation, you want to leave space for a little more, especially with the bassist, a little more interaction, a little more space. You don't want to fill up all of the bass player's space, and just as I don't want him filling up all of my space, you know. So you leave space, or I may play a little more sparse. Playing with a saxophone player is a little bit different, a horn player, because you do have to be a little more proactive rhythmically when you're playing with a horn player, because there's no drummer, no bass player. So that's the only change. You may play a little bit more in that situation. Some of the duo things I've done, like I did a duo thing with the violinist, Regina Carter, who has big ears. So one of the things that started that project, we were in the studio one time and told the engineer, just let the tape run. And we just played whatever. And what came out actually wound up being the title tune for the CD it was called Free Fall. And we just played. And wherever I went, she went. Wherever she went, I went. And it sounded like Bartok or somebody, you know, but it was just, so that's another kind of situation, you know, but to make that work, you have to kind of free yourself and allow yourself to say, oh, maybe this won't work, but go for it anyway, you know. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, just like taking chances.
Okay.
I think, JP, do you have the recording of East of the Sun? Just on that subject, I'm curious about the duo recordings with Stan Getz. Because I believe that this was his last recording around 91.
It was, yeah, it was.
So this is from a double album called People Time. And the first time I heard that, I thought these are like Beethoven string quartets or something. Every note is perfect. And,
I don't know about that, but thank you.
Well, if you'd like to, maybe we can listen to 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So that was a magical relationship, just how intensely lyrical both of you guys are when you played together. It had to be special.
It was very special. And I think one of the reasons it worked so much is that Stan was very lyrical. And so it kind of prompted me to try and play that way as well. So I owe him a debt in terms of that, especially in terms of that, you know, trying to just play as pretty as he played. Because, you know, and with the sound, his sound was so recognizable. So even my wife, who's not a musician, she recognizes Stan right away from his sound. She recognizes John Coltrane right away from his sound, you know. But Stan had a sound that was very, very special. He could play a ballad and make you cry. You know, he could do that, you know.
What pianists do you think have that aspect in their playing? I mean, I would say it's a little bit more difficult to have a unique sound in terms of timbre on an instrument, but touch, concept, feel.
I tell you, the first person who influenced me in terms of their touch was Tommy Flanagan, you know. And I heard Tommy the first time in junior high school. We had an art class, and the teacher would ask students to bring in recordings for inspiration to paint or whatever. So a friend of mine brought in a recording with it was Miles Davis and Sonny Rollins, Tommy, and I think Doug Watkins, maybe. And they did a Dave Brubeck piece, In Your Own Sweet Way. And immediately, I mean, Tommy got me just with his touch. It was like pearls, you know. And that was it for me. He was a big influence until the day he passed away, you know. And interesting, I got to, many years later, I actually got to do a duo recording, 2 pianos with him, and I was scared to death. Literally, I was scared to death because I'm here playing with my idol, somebody I really idolize, and I couldn't play for listening to him, you know. But it still was a great experience.
Now you know how we feel, and in all those lessons playing with you.
No.
You know, 45 minutes of all the things you are. Sometimes, I mean, and you're one idea after another. Imagine one tune for 45 minutes with Kenny Barron. I mean, that was just extraordinary experience. Besides the idea of playing two pianos, which is pretty challenging in terms of harmonically and staying out of each other's way, and you've done it with and recorded with a lot of the greats: Mulgrew Miller, Brad Meldau.
Yeah.
Who else?
Barry Harris, John Hicks. That's all I can think of right now. Dotto Maroney. And the thing is, it doesn't work with everybody. Yeah, and that's the thing. It doesn't work with it. It has nothing to do with you or the other person not being a good player. Sometimes you have different concepts of time, and that's very important, you know. Somebody may play a little bit ahead of the beat, somebody may play a little bit behind the beat. So that can lead to some rhythmic disparity there, you know, which can lead to some clashes, you know. I mean, fortunately, I've been lucky, and all the guys I've played with, it's been great. Probably Mulgrew for me is probably the one I've had the most fun with. Not the most fun, but because we've done it more. We had done it more than anybody, than I had done it with anybody else. I mean, we did big tours in Europe and stuff. So, and we never rehearsed ever. You know, we never planned a set. You know, we would sit down and he would look at me and say, "Go ahead," or I'd look at him and say, "Go ahead." You know, so he would just start something, and if I knew it, I would join it. If I didn't know it, I said, and he would know. Say, "Well, I don't know that one," you know, and he would keep on playing and go on to something else.
Yeah.
You know, but that was fun because you know it's like you don't know what's coming next. You know,
The on top of the beat, behind the beat, the concept of where you like to hear a rhythm section play. I do recall a conversation where you said Ben Riley and Ray Drummond, you said you wouldn't believe how easy it is to play.
it's like driving a Rolls Royce. For me, really, it was like driving a Rolls Royce. You know, there are certain rhythm sections like that. That was one of them for me, and also Ben Riley and Buster Williams. You know, but I mean, it made it so easy for me, and anything I wanted to play, I could play. So when I'm looking for a rhythm section player, I mean, I look for somebody who's going to make my stuff work. That sounds weird, but that's what you look for. You look for somebody who's going to make your stuff work, you know. So I don't want a bass player, for instance, who plays cello all night long. You know, so in other words, a bass player who plays just in the upper register all night. That drives me crazy. Because if I play a rootless voicing and there's no root there, then it makes what I'm playing sound kind of empty. You know, it has no bottom to it, you know. And I like bass players who play bass, B-A-S-E. You know, the bottom of the chord. I need to hear that. And Bulldog, and that's his nickname, Ray. We called him the Bulldog, but he did that. You know, and plus he had good ears. So anywhere I went, he was right there with me, you know. And Ben Riley had another kind of touch, but on cymbals. His cymbal beat was really magical. You know, for me, it's drummers, it's not so much about this kind of stuff. For me, it's about this, you know, the cymbal beat. You know, because if the cymbal beat is clear, nothing else matters. All the other stuff is gravy. But the cymbal beat, you know.
Didn't you tell me there was a guy went around sitting in just with a ride cymbal? And
Oh, yeah. What was his name? I can't think of it. Leon Parker. I was working at Bradley's with Harvey S., and this guy came in and Harvey said, "Man, you got to check this guy out." And all he had was a ride cymbal. That was it. No sock cymbal, you know. So he just set up his ride cymbal. No, and that was it. I didn't miss a thing because the cymbal beat was so happening, you know. And I actually hired him to make some gigs with me, you know. And it was great. I mean, it was really great. I mean, I never took him on the road, but I can imagine. No overweight, you know. No drum set, so
When
easy to travel.
That ride cymbal and the attack of the bass are locked in on top of the
Oh,
beat.
yeah,
It feels
yeah.
like nothing else.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. That was so like, it's like anything you go for, you can reach. If the situation is right, if the cymbal beat is great and the bass player and the time is right, anything you try and reach, you pretty much can.
Yeah, that's wonderful. We have another question. Could you come over to the mic?
Good afternoon. Hi.
Hi, how
I'm
are
a
you?
vocal major, and I just have a question about what would your advice be for improvisation for a vocalist to take their improv to the next level, and how do you feel about spacing?
About spacing?
For like, as far as how much space should you leave as a vocalist before you do another, phrase, or like how in connecting phrases as a vocalist for vocal
That's a good
improv?
question. And I don't know if I can answer it because it's such a personal thing. But I mean, the best way I can answer it, you don't want to crowd things. So you want the lyrics. You want the lyrics to really be heard and to really be understood. Now, in terms of improvisational stuff, I mean, I think the first thing, obviously you're a vocalist. So I think the first thing and foremost thing is to, in my mind anyway, is to really learn the melody unadorned, just as it is, and be able to do that. And once you know the melody with the lyrics as it is, and then from there you can stretch out. You can go in almost any direction. Once you really know where the lyrics are, what the lyrics are, and how the lyrics are spaced, and what the intent of the lyrics are. You can't overestimate the value of really knowing, and this is for musicians as well, knowing the lyrics to a song is really important, In terms of spacing and phrasing, I mean, you got to listen to who you like and see what strikes you, I did a record with Jimmy Scott. Have you guys ever heard of him? His name used to be Little Jimmy Scott. But he sang so far behind the beat, sometimes you say, do I have to play catch up? But he knew where he was.
Yeah.
He knew where he was, But that's the way he sang. He sang way behind the beat, One of his influences was Billie Holiday, And if you look at more modern singers, Nancy Wilson, she credits Jimmy Scott as being one of her influences, So it's about leaving space, and it's taking the time so that the lyrics are really understood. I think that's the important thing, And for musicians, I mean, again, for musicians, you should, as much as possible, learn the lyrics to a song, Somebody told me this story about Ben Webster. Ben Webster was playing, and all of a sudden he stopped. So somebody said, "What's wrong, Ben?" He said, "I forgot the lyrics." So that's how important lyrics are. Yeah. Hope I answered your question.
Oh, I have one more question.
Yeah, sure.
Who could you suggest that I listen to in order to not do typical like voicings? Because I know as a singer, like every singer kind of has the same kind of note that they go to for jazz, and I don't want to be a typical jazz improv. Like I don't want to do typical jazz improv. So who do you suggest that I listen to get a different feel for sound?
I can suggest some people. It depends. Again, it depends a lot on what you like. Because whatever it is that you like will pull you. You won't even have to. It will just pull you. But now I did a recording where I have a friend who's written lyrics for a lot of my songs. So on one of the records I did, I used
three different singers. One was a singer named Gretchen Parlato, who I really liked, and their style is different. She's not a screamer or shouter. Her voice is very, very soft, you know. So that's one style. I used a singer named Ann Hampton Calloway. A lot of people think of her as a cabaret singer, but I mean, she's an excellent jazz singer. She plays great piano, so she knows harmony. And do you play piano?
I mean, I can put chords together to write a song,
Yeah.
but not really.
Okay, but I mean, that's for whatever instrument, or if you're a singer, you should play piano, so that you can at least accompany yourself, or if nothing else, you can sit down and write music,
Yeah.
you know, and be able to play decent voicings. But she played piano, and then I used another singer who just recently passed, who was actually a drummer. His name was Grady Tate, but who passed, I think, last week. But Grady had this beautiful baritone voice, and they were all different. You know, each one of them was different.
Yeah, you mentioned Donnie, and I'm a really big fan of Layla Hathaway, his daughter, and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
she sings when she improvs notes that I wouldn't even think of, and I feel like she listens to so many different voicings and different instruments that it just comes out of her like water.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and it just
yeah, yeah.
flows very well.
But you gotta find your sweet spot, so to speak. You like who you like, and as much as possible, try and find out what they did. I happen to enjoy Lala Hathaway's recording, you know, and I enjoyed her father's recording. I don't know how much of you heard
Yes,
her
I
father, yeah, you know. Her and Donny Hathaway and Roberta Flack did a recording together many years ago. It was, for me, one of the best recordings. Yeah. Hope I answered your question.
Thank you so much.
All right, sure.
I think we can do one more question. Anybody else?
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Well, and yourself? So you went back to college a little bit later, not the typical just getting out of high school, going straight into music education. And you were out gigging and performing and really working before you went to school. So what would you say one or some of the most useful things you learned that you didn't necessarily learn from being out in the gig? You learned from just going to college and getting that different type of education than the actual in-person performance.
I think I understood your question. I'm not sure. Okay. I think when you're performing, there's a certain thing you learn as opposed to school. You know, practical experience will teach you some things that you won't learn in the classroom. You know, stuff in the classroom is great, and hopefully you get some experience actually playing, because that's important. You know, but your real education will start when you're out there. You know, in terms of your musical experience and living life. And one of the things that happens with experience that's important is when you're in here studying, you don't really have any stories to tell because you're young, you're very young. You haven't lived, you know. And that's one of the big differences between school. In school, you learn technique and you can work on your sound and things like that. But what experience will give you is something that you can't get in here, you know. And I'm not negating what's in here because it's very important, you know. But when you're out there, you know, I'll sum it up this way. I was talking with Ben Riley, and we were talking about young players and young musicians. And he was saying, yeah, well, I mean, right now, they don't really have any stories to tell, you know. And you say they'll be okay as soon as they have their hearts broken, you know. And that's what it's about. Experience, having experiences, that'll make all the difference in the world, you know. Here, you can work on your technique and get get the instrument. What do you do? What instrument?
I'm a vocalist.
You're a vocalist. Okay, but it's the same thing. You work on your vocal techniques and you get all of that together. But what will happen out there is that you'll learn how to emote. You know, you learn how to really tell a story. You know, the greatest compliment I ever got, ever in my life, and it only happened twice in 74 years, is making somebody cry. You know, it only happened twice in my life. You know, and when you're able to do that, I mean, I can't tell you what a special feeling that is. You know, that you move somebody that much to make them cry. You move them to tears, you know. But you can only do that when you have a story to tell. And that's what experience is, as opposed to just the academic side. So you need both. You need both, you know. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Yeah, sure.
So Kenny is going to perform one more piece.
All right. One of the things that's important for me, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I love to play ballads. And for me, that kind of separates. When you play something fast, you can, I guess in the vernacular, you can get over. But when you play a ballad, you know, you're kind of exposed. So any shortcomings you have in terms of being able to negotiate chords and things like that, it will definitely show up on a ballad. So learn to play ballads. All right? So that's what I'm.
Okay. JP, let's get a hipper picture up here for that.
Kenny, thank you for coming to visit us. Let's hear it for Kenny Barron.